Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host. I'm excited about today's episode, but before we get there, a shout out to our sponsor, Farm to Plate. They are creating tomorrow's food business ecosystem today. You can find out more at farmtoplate.io. Our guest has a different perspective on the food business. He's not necessarily a food guy from the get-go. Interested to hear his perspective. Welcome to the podcast, Craig Dunaway. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Penn Station, East Coast Subs. Hello, Craig.
Pam, thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear your investment and how you even got into the food business and how this whole Penn Station East Coast Subs business got started, because I think it's a little bit different than a lot of people who get into the food business.
It certainly wasn't planned. It was by accident many years ago. So I'm happy to share my story.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear what the impetus was. How'd you get started?
Well, sure. Well, I actually so I was in college, went to Indiana University Southeast in New Albany, Indiana, and there's a gentleman and I used to study together. I happened to play basketball and he played basketball, and they had a study hall for the athletes. And I think it was designed to make sure we studied. But we were both accounting majors, and, we spent time dreaming. I mean, you're 19 years old, you have no money, but you have a lot of dreams. And we discussed real estate and would that be a good investment one day? And so we just, over the course of a couple of years, just bantered back and forth of when we graduate from college, we're gonna buy some real estate. Charlie graduated and it went his way, went to work, as a controller someplace. I graduated and went to work for a CPA firm. Spent a year or so working to obtain my license. And lo and behold, we worked and, sort of lost touch with each other. And then 3 years later, at the accounting firm, the partners told me we were hiring a controller, and it was my buddy Charlie. He came back to me, and this is the mid '80s. It's literally 1985, and we had a friend of ours was looking to become a Papa John's franchisee. And for context, at the time there were only about 45 Papa John's. I mean, there's over
Wow.
5,000 a day, but
Yeah.
this is 35 plus years ago. So Charlie worked on a projection for our friend. He was looking to go to Indianapolis, Indiana, and he put this model together. And one day he said, let's go to lunch. We went to lunch and he said, you know what? Remember that real estate discussion we had several years ago back in college? I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. He said, well, let's ditch that and become Papa John's franchisees. And
Okay.
I literally had never worked in a restaurant a day in my life. Growing up in high school, I had other jobs, but they were not the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
So Charlie and I met with Papa John's. In fairness, Charlie played high school baseball with the founder of Papa John's, John Schnatter, so he knew John really well. We were able to get an audience, and Papa John's was looking for guys and gals like we were. People who were young, aggressive, would work as hard as you had to work. And we met with them. We were in Louisville, Kentucky. We had huge dreams, Pam. We
Yeah.
wanted a really, really big market, and we wanted to own the market. Don't ask me why. That's just Nashville was taken as a corporate market. Louisville was already sold. Our friend had taken Indianapolis, and the closest market was Cincinnati, Ohio. And I had probably spent maybe 10 hours in Cincinnati my entire life, and that was probably attending 3 or 4 Reds baseball games. But we drove the market, liked what we saw, loved the Papa John's product,
Yeah.
and said we'd like to own the market. And at the time, we didn't have the financial wherewithal to own the market, but Papa
No.
John's wanted to grow aggressively with people like us, and they sold us the market with the caveat that if somebody comes along and wants to do a restaurant, you have a first right to do it. But if you can't do it, we're going to sell it to somebody else.
Okay.
And what we have to lose? So we said, sure. So we became Papa John's franchisees in late 1985 and in 1986. I stayed in public accounting the whole time that we were Papa John's
Okay.
franchisees. But Charlie, after a year or two, he got out of what he was doing as our controller at the accounting firm, and he became our full-time managing partner
How
within
about
our
that?
Papa John's. So that's how we initially got started to become Papa John's franchisees.
Yeah, to even get into the food business. And it seems like at each step along the way, you're like, well, what have we got to lose? Oh, this looks like, oh, okay, what have we got? Just this series of events. I don't really believe in coincidences, but you kind of end up where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I remember the very first loan that we had taken out. It's so funny to look back this many years later, but we met with the banker. I knew him from the world of public accounting. We didn't know each other directly, but we were in Jeffersonville, Indiana, which is a smaller, community. So a lot of
Right.
business women know each other. And we went to him and asked him if we could borrow $100,000. He loaned it to us. It literally
Wow.
cost us only $94,000 to build the restaurant. Charlie and I put $3,000 each in our pocket, and I thought I was rich. I ran into the banker a couple of years later, and he said, "You know what, Craig?" He said, "We didn't believe in the model at the time, but we believed in you guys. And we knew
Wow.
that if something happened, you would pay us back." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that. We believed in the model also, or we wouldn't have done it, but I appreciate you having faith in us." So that's what kicked it off. I really did not know anything about the restaurant industry. What I did know was numbers. And it
Yes.
didn't take long for me to intimately understand that the restaurant business is a pennies business. Everything that you
Okay.
do is, if you want to maximize your return on investment in the restaurant, you have to micromanage pennies. And you can imagine, coming from a world of public accounting, how I see the world. It's binary to me. Everything's yes, no, black, white. And in our first couple of restaurants, we a lot of success, but we also had a lot of opportunities for improvement. Maybe in the Papa John's world, somebody orders a pizza, and instead of giving them one garlic sauce, you give them three garlic sauces. You're never going to make up that lost opportunity by not giving garlic sauce to the next two people. And so that started my mind working on creating efficiencies within, not Papa John's, but within our restaurants at Papa John's. And
Okay.
ultimately, between 1985 and really 1996, we opened 11 Papa John's. And as I like to say, early on, made money in spite of ourselves. The Papa John's brand was taking off. We were getting more confident in what we were doing, and we were producing enough cash flow that we continued to plow it back into the business. And so,
Yeah.
Charlie was doing a good job with that. I stayed in public accounting. By the time I got out of public accounting, I was a partner. I remember when I told them I was leaving. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Well, yeah, because we're
You
still
know,
at Papa John's, and I want to know how you got to Penn Station,
yeah.
East
So,
Coast subs. So we got to figure that out.
Charlie and I, my father passed away in December, and he worked literally, he was 90, he was going to be 94 in January, and he
Mm,
literally retired when he was 89 years old. And
wow.
I came from an extremely strong work ethic. He was the hardest working person I know.
Okay.
And, I would do public accounting Monday through Saturday during tax season and audit season.
Hmm.
And then Charlie and I literally were in Cincinnati every weekend. And we were visiting our restaurants and meeting
Okay.
with the managers and our managing partner. And, we were really trying to build something special. And really, I think in 1997, looking back, I don't think it was by accident. I think it was serendipity. Charlie approached me one day and he said, "I'm really tired of traveling back and forth to Cincinnati all the time." And Pam, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't smart enough to say, "Well, then why don't you move?" And we
Yeah,
were partners, we were partners, and
sure.
that's okay. Well, we need to figure something out. And about the same time, and all of what I'm getting ready to tell you happened within about a 2 month period. We had the second largest franchisee in Cincinnati for Papa John's. His name was Mike Carpenter, and Mike approached us and said, "We'd like to buy your restaurants." But he made us an offer, and I said, "We might be interested." And then the
Yeah.
third thing that happened really simultaneously with that is, one weekend Charlie and I were up here, we stumbled upon Penn Station's food, and we
Mm,
went in, and I remember having a large chicken teriyaki sandwich, a large fry, and a large lemonade. It was probably more food than I'd ever eaten in my life, but
wow.
it was phenomenal.
Hmm.
And that got Charlie's and my wheels spinning. And,
Sure.
driving back to Louisville that day from Cincinnati, it's like, let's meet with Penn Station. Let's find what they're about. Papa John's is big and successful now, and let's see what Penn Station is. Charlie began the dialogue with our founder, Jeff Osterfeld, and loved what Jeff had to say. Loved his focus on quality. Loved his focus on franchisees have to make money first. And
Right.
I said this a few minutes ago, how I see the world. It's very binary to me. And Jeff is touching all of my hot buttons, not because he's trying to
Mhm.
sell me, because that's his makeup.
Right.
And, with between Mike offering to buy our restaurants, Charlie telling me he was tired of traveling and loving what Jeff had to say, we said, you know what? Let's sell our Papa John's and let's become Penn Station franchisees in Louisville, Kentucky. So
Wow.
7 and 98, that's what we did.
You know what, Craig? I'm hearing just a common thread here, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I want to say it's a mindset situation where you two were, you had this mindset that you wanted to do something together and that you wanted to make a difference in whatever that was. And so these opportunities are presenting themselves and you're executing them best you can. But then I don't know, the challenges got to be a little bit more than you wanted to deal with. And somebody else wanted the Papa John restaurant. So you found a new concept again, but your same focus, your same entrepreneurial
Yeah.
spirit. Well, we could make a difference with this. This is great food, whatever that might be. And your mission's aligned with the creator of Penn Station.
It,
So
it,
it
it,
sounded like a great marriage for everyone.
it was, I was very fortunate. I mean, I never, kind of like the banker said that, we don't think you're going to succeed, but we know you'll pay us back. The
Yeah.
fear of failure, the thought of failure never crossed my mind. The concern of failure, when you're starting out a new business and you're wondering how you're going to meet the payroll that's coming up in
Yeah.
2 days.
Yeah.
I mean, that was always there, but it was there as a motivator.
Okay.
I think that, I mean, from my perspective, I think when adversity hits, you either run straight into the fire or you run away from it. And I never once thought about running away from, the fire. Charlie and
That,
I started opening Penn stations in Louisville, Kentucky, and we found out it was a little more difficult than what we thought. We weren't arrogant about it; we were confident in it.
right.
And we
Sure.
opened our first restaurant thinking we were going to do 60 or $70,000 a month in sales, and you're doing $21,000 a month in sales because nobody knows who you are. And
Okay.
I remember early on that first restaurant, after the first week or two, a customer coming in and saying, "Oh, I thought you were an oil change shop." But Charlie and I were persistent. We had made good money from the selling of our Papa John's, and we plowed it all back into Penn Station. So
Yeah.
literally over the course of 18 months, we opened 4 Penn stations, and
Okay.
we built out a corporate office. It was a condo office, but we built it out,
Sure.
and we opened number 5 shortly thereafter, and we weren't making any money. We were doing okay. But we were now at the point where it's 1998, 1999, and Charlie and I have become confident in our careers.
Yeah.
I'd become confident being a partner at a regional CPA firm that was one of the larger firms in Louisville. Charlie had become confident at what he was doing, and it caused us to each hone in on what was important. And what was important when we first started out wasn't as important to, his concerns and strengths were not mine anymore. And so we started growing
Okay.
apart a little bit. And at the same time, I ran for our franchisee advisory council at Penn Station. It was at Jeff's behest. He said, "You're a finance guy, you're in this for the money. And
Yeah.
the other 4 people on it are here operationally. I want to know what a numbers guy thinks." And so I
Mm-hmm.
ran and won and served on that committee for about a year. And little did I know, Jeff asked me to do that. And he started calling me a lot. "Hey, I want to get your opinion on this, get your opinion on that." We had a meeting in Louisville with the VP of operations of Penn Station, and they were basically telling us everything we were doing wrong, and in a good way, in a constructive way. And I should preface this: Charlie and I are really good friends today. So
Sure.
we had a struggle for a brief period of time, but we kissed and made up. But I said, "Charlie, we need to listen to the founder. He created this brand, and we need to, he wrote the ops manual that you were critiquing." And
Right.
so ultimately, what Charlie and I decided was one of us should go our separate ways. Jeff had asked me about this same time, again, serendipity again, I think. He said, "You know what? I've been watching you, I've been calling you. I think you have really, really good negotiation skills. You try to create compromise and win-win situations. You stand your ground when you have to, but you don't want to see
Right.
someone else lose at yours or anyone else's expense. And
Right.
so I'd like you to move up Cincinnati and become president. And I was the youngest partner at our accounting firm, Pam, and
Yeah.
I was really the go-to guy for younger staff. Yeah, I mean, you got someone who's a manager who's, maybe 32, 33 years old, and they're approaching you saying, do you think they're not going to ask the 60-year-old partner, they're going to ask the youngest partner, do you
Yeah.
think I have partnership potential?
Yeah.
And I told several of them yes along the way. And I told several people, no, I don't think you have what it has, and I'll try to help you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I felt like if I didn't take the opportunity that Jeff offered me, then I was hypocritical. I mean, you can't give
Mm-hmm.
my career advice that I gave was not me, hey, let me give you career advice. It was people
Yeah.
asking me for my opinion.
Sure.
And how could I do that to others? Talk to them about taking chances and taking risks, and every
Right.
sport cliche, if you can't steal second base if you don't get a lead off first. And I thought I'd be hypocritical.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that I think was important is, as I like to say, public accounting gave me my gray hair. Uh, it was it was very, very instructive. It was intense, but that's what gave me my gray hair. And I didn't want to be 50 years old billing my time out on an hourly basis, because it
Right.
is hard. And if you're not
Sure.
billing your time out, you're not making any money. And Papa John's taught me of the exponential growth you can have on the retail side when you have
Right.
one restaurant and then you open a second and a third and on and on. And I just
Yeah.
didn't want to bill my time out. There's only so many hours in a day.
Right there, that's a really important point. I mean, there's a couple along the way here that I want to unpack, but one
Sure.
is that whole leverage capability. And I think a lot of food entrepreneurs bring it back to, you're working in the food business, but you're working within franchising or talking about scaling what you're able to do so that it's not just dependent on you. And I think a lot of listeners that we might have are in the food business, and maybe they've got a one-off shop of some sort. And so your words of wisdom about thinking about how they leverage themselves and how they can take advantage of the skills that they've got and duplicate that without them being the one that has to be executing every single thing that happens, even within a one location or one function. If you can out of the detail and enable other people to do those, then you free yourself up to expand your concept or do different things. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. That's essentially what your brain was thinking as far as career advice. And you didn't want to be that one-off billable, have to be there doing it to bill your hours. You want to figure out, how can you do that? And you're also in a position where you're enabling other people to do that, because in the franchise model, you're helping
Yeah.
them and you're counseling them and you're using your experience with Papa John's and East Coast to empower them to do the same.
Yeah, I learned that, I mean, you hit the key word in that, and it's scale. And if you want
Right.
to, if you want to make a lot of money, and I'll be honest, I didn't get in it to change the world. I got in it to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned early on in Papa John's, and I learned this in the world of public accounting too, because I worked with so many successful entrepreneurs, and I was in the accounting and auditing world, in public accounting. And so it allowed me to work with very successful entrepreneurs and learn from them and what they did. And to get to scale, you have to have systems and procedures in place. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, as a Papa John's franchisee, and even today when I look at, our Penn Station franchisees, the difference between the single store operator and the individual who has 10 is not work ethic, it's systems and procedures. And
Yeah.
what you find is that the individuals who can't put systems in place try to outwork the problem. And you can only outwork the problem for so long, because if you're devoting, let's just pick the single store operator who's working 50 hours a week. Now he opens a second restaurant. He doesn't have any systems in place, but he decides to spend 25 hours at one restaurant and 25 at another, still working the same amount of hours, but it's being less because he doesn't have, or she doesn't have, systems and procedures in place. And so
Right.
what I saw without fail in the Papa John side, and learned when I came into the Penn Station system, is everyone who had scale had a system and a procedure for everything. not some of the
Amazing.
things, everything that was important, everything that was manageable. And so, dumb little simple example is, once talk about buying out Charlie, but, I put a procedure in place that said every general manager has to make the deposit by 9:30 a.m. every day. I didn't want
Okay.
them to leave the restaurant during business hours. I wanted them to be there to take care of the guest. And the
Right.
single store operator who doesn't have a system and a procedure, he goes to the bank himself every day, which means he's leaving the restaurant. And then when they open
Right.
their second restaurant without a system and procedure, often they will leave the first restaurant, go to the second restaurant to get the deposit, and then take it to the bank.
Right.
It's a
Right.
little dumb example, but one of the first
Yeah.
things I said to you was this is a pennies business. And
Yes.
if it's measurable and it's financial, you have to have a system and a procedure to protect it. And that's what
Well,
I learned.
let's dive into that, because you've been able to implement some systems at Penn Station that have really made a big difference. I mean, you understand the value of data, and now that technology has caught up, share some of you've been able to make it so that your franchisees, you've implemented systems for them to be able to have some critical analytics to make reasoned decisions and fact-based decisions in their restaurants.
Yeah, when I first came to Penn Station as the president in 1999, I left public accounting. That my one, I was honored that when I left, they asked me if I would stay and be the managing partner of the accounting firm. It was the goal I
Yeah.
had from the day I started, and then I
Yeah.
didn't accept it. But when I came to work with Jeff, I've got all these ideas about systems and procedures, and Jeff and I see the world through the same prism.
Mm-hmm.
So he already had a lot of systems in place. But I think what I brought from my public accounting background, because I had presented, there's nothing sexy about presenting an audited financial statement to a board of directors. And I had done that a lot. And, know your audience. You look out in the audience and you see eyes gloss over it. And what I learned is from that, present the numbers that are important and that are meaningful and that
Okay.
impact this business in a positive or negative way. And so when I came to Penn Station, in fairness, I was a franchisee, so I intimately understood this. On the franchising side, I wanted to make sure that what we did was we gave franchisees the tools to focus on those things that were important. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew from 15 years of public accounting that people are often extremely intimidated by numbers. They don't
Right.
know what they mean. They don't know how to interpret it. Algebraic relationships, say, between the balance sheet and the income statement. And,
Right.
and rather than try to learn that, they avoid it. And so, we used to just have a cash register system here. And when we started implementing the point of sale system, and this is the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to make sure we focused on was not 500 data points to the franchisees. I wanted to make sure we focus on really the 10 data points that made them money or cost them
Okay.
money. And, and,
Okay.
and fortunately, Jeff already had systems in place manually that helped manage that. But what I wanted to, further do was to make sure that franchisees intimately understood what was behind the numbers. So one thing that Jeff did that I thought was phenomenal is he required franchisees to submit a financial statement to us on a monthly basis. And it was in a prescribed format. And when I
Okay.
came in, I honed it a little bit and cleaned it up from my CPA perspective. But
Sure.
it was due on the 20th of the month at 5 p.m. And if the 20th fell on a weekend, then it was due the following Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And, I believe that for financial data to be relevant, it has to be timely. And
Okay.
so we started slowly changing that. So now they're due on the 12th of the month. But
Okay.
what we do is we take that data and we give it back to the franchise system and we highlight the areas that are extremely relevant to them. And
Okay.
so it's not, it's what I said, Pam, you don't want to inundate with 500 data points. You want to talk
Right.
about the financial points that move the needle.
Like
Talk
the more actionable points where if this is in the wrong place or the trend is going in the wrong direction, here's what we need to do, evaluate what you need to do to
right.
make a difference there so they can take some actionable steps to change that, is what I'm kind of hearing you're getting to.
Very much so. So, I mean, what we're concentrating on, I mean, you have to control food and labor cost. And I
Right.
mean, that's the bread and butter of this industry. And I tell prospective franchisees that if you don't control labor, you're working for your employees. If you don't control food, you're working for our vendors. And if you
Yeah.
don't control your lease, you're working for your landlord. And those are
There you
most
go.
often the three biggest expenses in the restaurant industry. And everything else becomes a detail. And so those are
Yeah.
the key elements that we focus on within our point of sale system. I mean, the lease is the lease. There's a long story behind the lease that I won't get into, but I had a franchisee probably 20 years ago. He said, I'm just not making, you always talk about maximizing return on investment, Craig, and I feel like I'm not maximizing my return. I literally went through line item by line item with him on his P&L, and I said,
Hmm.
Joe, there's not one thing that I can tell you that you're doing wrong that will maximize your return, but I will give you 20 items that if you do all of these things, I can assure you you're going to make more money.
A
It
little
was
bit here,
clearly
a little
pennies
bit there.
focused. And it added up to about 4 or 5 points. And you're doing $800,000 a year in sales. 5% is a lot of money, $40,000.
Yes.
But it wasn't
Yes.
made up in one line item, it was made up in 15 line items.
Yeah, that's also a great lesson to take. Often there's not one big thing, there's just a lot of little things that if you can incrementally move the needle a little bit in several different areas, then the bigger needle moves.
Yeah, and
Sometimes
I
we
would
discount
say
that.
between the systems and the single store operator, I mean, I've been at conferences, and I was approached one time. I happened to be on a panel, and a gentleman had a concept, and he approached me, and he said, "How do I get to 10 locations?" And I said, "How many do you have?" And he said, "Three." And I said, "Are they profitable?" And he said, "No." And I said,
Oh,
"Well, that's how you get to 10. You have to make those three profitable. And you need to
yeah.
go through every line item on your P&L." And the way I approached it, Pam, I mean, I grew up in a humble background. I didn't have an
Sure.
unlimited supply of money. I had to make it work.
Yeah.
And when I bought out Charlie, if Charlie listens to this, he may hear this story because he's probably never heard it before. But when I bought out Charlie, I had 5 locations. I bought him out in August of 99 or December of 99. I bring back our financial statements, our invoices in bankers boxes, and I'm literally sitting on my living room floor reviewing every invoice. And
Wow.
we're at a break even point at best, which basically means you're not paying your bank debt. So I'm coming out of pocket to pay the bank monthly.
Yeah.
And my mindset was, do I need this expense to keep this restaurant open? That was my starting point.
Hmm.
And I also called other franchisees and said, how much is your laundry and linen bill per month? I went through every line item like I had instructed that franchisee a couple of years later. And
Mm-hmm.
the savings that I generated from eliminating waste paid the note back to Charlie. It just continued to reinforce that pennies business for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think often franchisees or restaurant owners don't do that. They want to be all things to all people or take care of the guest and whatever it takes. And
Mm-hmm.
you still have to make money at it. And I appreciate. I said I'm not a chef, and I'm not the guy who wants to change the world with our food, but you have to be efficient at it. And if you're not efficient at it as a restaurant owner, you need to find somebody who does care about those pennies.
Well, and I think that's really wise, Craig, that a lot of times people in the food business, like you said, they're focused in other areas, but the reality is that they could, even if they're profitable, they maybe could do so much better if they would pay attention. Just because you're making money doesn't mean you're making what you should be making or could be making, that might enable you to scale if you want to do that, or put some more away, or put some more money back into the business, or bring in some different equipment, just the different things that you could spend the money on. I think that's really,
Well,
go
and, and,
ahead.
and I don't want to add, just because it's how I think and it's important to me, it's not about being greedy. It's about being efficient at what you do.
Yeah.
And to me, if you create efficiencies and you micromanage the pennies, ultimately the dollars will come. I mean, I never once
Hmm.
got up and thought, how much money can I make by taking it out of somebody else's pocket? I never
No.
thought that. I thought if I create all of this, then ultimately I can be the benefactor of.
I think all of us should also treat our personal finances that way. The want to haves, like, what expenses on this list here are necessary versus, to keep the household running versus, just we could bring it down to all different levels. But I
Oh, yeah.
appreciate your financial perspective, Craig. It's really fun to. So, anyway, let's talk about your COVID experience before we go, because I know everybody had a situation with COVID, and I'm sure your restaurant chains, your stores were no different. And has that changed how you're moving forward?
Short answer is yes. I
Yes.
remember, I guess I'm a fighter. I know I'm not a quitter. Early March of 2020, when there was a buzz of what's going on, in Europe and what's making its way to the United States, we weren't sure what to think. Studied it from afar, but didn't know where it was going to go. And then fortunately or unfortunately for us in Ohio, the governor basically shut all the businesses down and shut restaurants down. And we felt like that we had a choice that I can't overemphasize this enough, that we just have an intestinal fortitude that we are never, ever going to quit. In 2011, we had a credit card breach. It taught me about crisis management. And I was talking to Lance Vaught. Lance is our president now. And Lance said, we had that credit card breach. You sent out a memo constantly to reassure the franchisees, let them know what was going on. This is what you can expect. And Lance was right. Over the course of 52 weeks, I literally sent out 104 memos. And, our attorney said, you're not going to do that. And I said, oh, yes, I am. I am absolutely going to do this, because in a crisis, if you don't intimately communicate what's going on,
Communicate.
people are going to fill in the gaps, and it's going to create
Hmm.
gossip, and it's going to create inefficiencies. And so Lance said that to me. And so we gathered everybody, we gathered the team first, and said, we don't know where this is going yet, but we're going to figure this out. And he and I started working in our conference room every day for 6 months together, side by side. And, I sent out the first memo explaining what was going on. And what we tried to do was assure the franchisees and say, look, you take care of your employees, you take care of your guests, you make sure the food is served high quality that Penn Station has, and we will do all of everything outside the four walls of your restaurant. We will take care of the marketing. We will take care of ensuring you have the continual flow of product every day. And that's what we did. And I think for the first 55 days of COVID, we sent a memo out every day. Pam, because I don't know if this is good or bad, because I was an auditor by trade. You have to trust but verify. And I don't trust until I do. And so, the lady I work with at the office here, who does a phenomenal job, I told her, I said, Cindy, I hate to say this, but whatever we are told by a supplier, I need you to verify from another source. If they tell you that they
Yeah.
ship steak to U.S. Food Service, I need you to verify with U.S. Food Service the steak was shipped. And so that's the
Okay.
give and take that we did to make sure that the franchisees were successful.
Right, because supplying, doing everything outside of their four walls, let me just pause, and ensuring that they had the supplies they needed, that probably when you were saying that initially, you didn't realize
It
that whole
was a it
supply
was a
chain.
huge challenge. And
Yeah.
Jeff Osterfeld, our founder, didn't in 1985 created the brand. He didn't say, you know what, I'm going to design a brand that can address COVID in 36 years. He created a system that allowed us to take advantage of our efficiencies, and it was
Hmm.
getting great food out fast. And when consumers no longer could come in the restaurant, it allowed us to play to one of our strengths. And we weren't even utilizing third party delivery at the time. We thought it was too expensive.
Uh,
We didn't like what it did to the quality of our product. But we were forced, I'll use that word forced. We were forced to
mhm.
have to think about it differently. We decided to implement third party. And at one time during COVID, it was about 35% of our sales.
Yes,
And
that's substantial.
when you look at a digital marketing strategy at the time, many, many brands pulled back. And once again, we really kind of took the contrarian approach. And it's like, well, if people aren't spending money marketing, that means marketing people are going to be looking for money, and it's going to be a lot less expensive. So we doubled our spend. It
Okay.
allowed our franchisees in part to thrive, did not work in the office. It's like, how can we expect our general managers who are frontline every day in the restaurant
Mm-hmm.
to be in front of consumers, to be in front of other employees, and we're hiding at home behind a desk. We said, no way. We are
Yeah.
coming into the office every day. We will create safe spaces for you. And Pam, part of that, it was by design because we wanted franchisees and customers to know we were there for them. And part of it was our
Mhm.
makeup.
And to
So
make it
it has
work.
created so many efficiencies in our model today. May have taken years that with COVID took months to.
Right. I think that word force, you don't like that, but we were headed in that direction anyway, as far as changing the delivery models. Consumers were going to be warming up to, ordering food and either just coming and picking it up or having it delivered. Certainly more people than I ever could have imagined are now having things delivered that they never would have thought about having delivered before
I
COVID, to your
agree.
point. And it just sped things up for all of us. And so, not a bad
Yeah,
thing, but you definitely had to adjust before you were ready to adjust. But moving forward, then, so you've been able to make some changes that are positive. Again, you're scaling within your own model to have
right.
some different options. Not a bad thing. Painful at the time, I think. Everyone will agree. But now moving forward, what are you looking at for Penn Station subs moving forward as far as any
Well,
innovation or
just
technology or
yeah, I mean, it impacts what you just said. I mean, what COVID taught was adapt or die. And it used to be
okay.
as a restaurant operator, you are going to receive food the way I want you to receive food. And then COVID changed it to no, we're going to do it our way. So what it's caused Penn Station to do is a couple of years ago, we hired a general man. He's our director of franchise services. Which basically means his responsibility is to understand intimately how customers want to order their product. Do they want to do it through AI? Do they want to order it through their phone? Do they want to order it on the web? Do they want to come in? And then he evaluates technology to determine, is this going to be something that is a trend in the long term where the industry's going? Or is this going to be a fad? Our online ordering portal was a little clunky. So we've had to make it more efficient. As I
Yeah.
said, we did not have third party delivery, and now we have we have the big three, delivering. It's still 15 or
Mhm.
16% of our business.
How
And
many
orders,
stores do you have?
we're
Because
based in
this is
Cincinnati. We
yeah.
have 325 locations
Yeah,
roughly in
so
15 states.
325 locations, because when you make a decision, it affects a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so as you're evaluating this technology or the different delivery mechanisms, there's over 300 stores to.
Well, that's true. And well, you have to think there's a myriad of things you have to think about. I mean, one of them is just you're crossing over 15 taxing authorities with a bunch of
Okay.
local taxing authorities. So
True.
you have to
True.
consider that, but I wouldn't make a decision solely because of taxes. I think what franchisees, you didn't ask me this question specifically, but I'll answer it a little bit of a different way, is that you
Sure.
have to make a decision that has the brand's best interest in mind and 325 restaurants in mind. And what may be good for one restaurant that's up the hill from here 3 miles away may not be good for the other 324. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I learned from the credit card breach and what I learned from COVID was, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I mean it in a good way, is you have to communicate the facts clear and concisely. You have to intimately articulate how it impacts the brand. You have to intimate how it impacts your individual restaurant. And if you can create that honesty and candor with the system, which I think we have credibility with franchisees, they know that we are making individual decisions on behalf of the brand and not making individual decisions to their detriment. That's our culture, and that's just credibility, right? I mean, that's just integrity is what
Yeah.
it is. And I think if you've got that and if you've built that culture, it makes it much easier when a crisis occurs. So the technological side has changed significantly. You asked what else?
Yeah.
We're building smaller restaurants today. 80%
Oh,
of our food is consumed off premise. And so
okay.
you don't need 50 seats. you may need 25 or 30. So that's created efficiencies.
Yeah.
If you don't need 50 seats, you don't need 1,800 square feet, you need 1,500. Anything that creates efficiencies for the consumer with a focus on the quality of the product and operations, because we have to take care of our other customer, which is the franchisee. Uh,
Mhm.
that's the way we look at every decision we make. Does it help maximize their return? Does it deliver a better product to the consumer? And that's our approach. Does it create a win-win? I mean, I really
Right.
sort of started out saying it's about maximizing return on investment to franchisees. So that's the way we approach those technological changes that we're implementing today, that Tyler's implementing.
Kudos to you for hiring somebody to evaluate all of that and what the effects are and what you should do moving forward, and just get some, really goes to your analytical method of how you evaluate things, and you have all along, keeping that franchisee and the profits in mind, because if the franchisee's not making any money, you're not going to be able to expand the brand. They're not going to be able to keep their store. Like, it's just a waterfall downhill. So you don't want to do
It's
that for sure.
that's very, very true. That is
Yeah.
very true. We are selling return on investment, and our
Mhm.
mechanism to do that happens to be cheesesteaks and fresh cut fries and fresh squeezed lemonade.
Yes, well, and I have to say I can't wait to try it when I'm up in one of the areas where you have a store. I'm going to be definitely seeking it out. Listen, Craig, thank you so much for being with us today and imparting just your perspective on the food business. Really, that heavy financial accounting, just bringing that thinking to what people are doing in the food industry. I just think it's a really important piece.
No, I'm excited about the industry. I think we've got some tailwinds pushing us forward. The industry survived COVID, and I think it created so many opportunities. It really allowed, it's like when you have a health issue and you're like, I need to make some changes in my life. And I think the industry had some major issues that caused us to have operational challenges that were inefficient. We had to fix. And I think it caused a lot of operators to make financial changes they need to fix. And, there's nothing like a national pandemic to do that. So I'm really excited for our industry. I mean, I don't attend a lot of conferences, but when I do, there's a commonality theme of problems, and you've brought up a lot of those problems today that we've addressed. And so I would say, as a general rule, the operators I talk to are very optimistic going forward.
That's great to hear. So great to hear. And thank you to those of you who listened and watched us on YouTube and other channels. We appreciate you. And if you'd like to be notified of future episodes of Future Foodcast, subscribe, like, and comment. We'd love to know what kind of guests, what you'd like to hear about the food industry moving forward. Until next time, thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.